Okay, welcome. Just so that you know that you're hopefully in the right place, this is the Hot State Cool Roofs, working with the CEC and utilities to mitigate the urban heat island effect breakout session. My name is Javier Mariscal. I'm with Southern California Edison. I'll be serving as facilitator / moderator. I'll also be speaking. We also have Jonathan Parfrey from Climate Resolve, who will be our first presenter, followed by Joe Lawyer from the California Energy Commission, who will be speaking to some of the regulations if you were a jurisdiction contemplating adopting a cool roof ordinance, and we'll get into what that means. And then I will then kind of wrap it up with the tools, the technical assistance that's available to you if you're a jurisdiction thinking about adopting a cool roof ordinance. And if you were in the talk that just preceded us in the main pavilion, Brendan mentioned from Chula Vista that they adopted a cool roof ordinance. As Jonathan also mentioned, the work that he's done with the city of LA, there are certain hoops that you kind of need to go through, and where, as the utilities out there willing to help in providing you with technical assistance, because it is kind of expensive to do the kind of studies that need to be done. And working through the California Public Utility Commission, we do have funds available. And so we definitely want to partner with you. And so I'll be speaking to that. We're all going to probably spend maybe 10, 12 minutes giving presentations to kind of give you background information. So we should be done with that within, say, 30 minutes or so. And then we can follow that, hopefully, with good discussion. So what I am going to ask is if you have questions, maybe we hold it for the Q&A, so you can get a good comprehensive background as to all the issues surrounding cool roofs. But if there is a burning question, please do stop us, because if there's a technical question, and Jonathan's probably going to hit you with a lot of science behind cool roofs, please ask, just so that we have a good foundation for our discussion that follows this. So, Jonathan, 10 minutes about? Good?
Less.
Okay, so no more than 10 minutes per, and then we'll get into a nice discussion, hopefully. So with that said, I'm going to let Jonathan, if you don't mind, spending a minute or two giving a little background so folks understand, who you represent and the group that you're with, and then we could jump into your presentation.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks very much, Javier. And I hope that you understand the scope of what we're trying to present here is to provide real sort of understanding and of the necessary steps that is required to not only pass a cool roof ordinance, but to make it legally enforceable. And so I'm really delighted to present what we did in Los Angeles, and I need to caveat it at the very beginning in that we've done the first half of passing the ordinance, and to make it actually enforceable is the next step, and we look forward to working closely with our friends at Southern California Edison and the California Energy Commission, and of course working with our local utility, the LA Department of Water and Power, as well as the City of LA's Building and Safety Department. So this is our organization is formed to provide effective action on climate change in the Los Angeles area. And we were founded because we felt very strongly that the climate change has been made to be so scary, so global in scale, that people feel ineffectual in the face of it. And if everyone feels that way, we're not going to do anything about it. So we felt there had to be some actions taken. So we work very closely with the city, with the state. Our organization is for example, we are the co-managers of the state's climate assessment that is being developed both by the Department of Natural Resources and the California Energy Commission. We've also had contracts with Metro, which is the LA Metropolitan Transportation Authority, on their climate adaptation plan. And we also work with other utilities in the region. So that's who we are. And, that's the city of LA. There are ways of dealing with both climate change, climate impacts, as well as with air quality issues, and that's something that we care a great deal about. And there is definitely a nexus between temperature and the creation of ozone from nitrogen oxide. And there are a number of climate threats to Southern California. We wanted to show this picture of the fire in the Hollywood Hills directly above the the Griffith Park Observatory. And so there are these threats and something that we pay attention to. And yet, when you come into Los Angeles from the airport, and I don't know if they have postcards at the airport anymore, where they have that carousel with the postcard. Well, when I was growing up, they had those. And this was the picture that would always be on those postcards of the San Gabriel Mountains in the background and LA in the foreground. That you have to work a palm tree into the photo as well to show that the distinction between the sort of semi-arid climate of Los Angeles with the snow-covered mountains. We worked with some climate scientists at UCLA, and we helped them release 2 studies. One was 2 years ago on the forecast on temperatures in Los Angeles, and I referenced that earlier today, seeing between 3.5 to 6 degree increase in the greater LA area. But they came out with a second study that we helped them release just last year, which was on snowfall in Southern California mountains. And by mid-century, regardless of the emissions scenario, which means we could all unplug everything tomorrow, the greenhouse gases are worked into the climate system so that by mid-century we're going to see a 40% reduction in local snowfall in our local mountains. So one of the things that we like to do is not just give people the bad news, but we also like to share with them visions of possible futures. So right now in the San Fernando Valley, there's these playgrounds that get up to like 150 degrees Fahrenheit, just the surface temperature. They bring kids in, they can't play on the playgrounds. And so we like to provide a vision of what could happen instead, that there can be other ways of letting our kids recreate. And this is right in downtown LA. I live right near this area, the LA Live, Figueroa Street, and there's a lot of pavement there. But our view is that in meeting the challenge of climate change, you can actually improve your local cityscape. So here's a vision called My Figueroa. It's actually moving forward. The streetcar is something that has been voted for by local residents in downtown LA, and this is one rendering of what it would look like on Figueroa. Very, very different than it does today. And here's another section of Figueroa, and this connects USC with downtown LA. Some of you have probably been out there and you go, it's not very friendly between downtown and USC. Now we're trying to change that. And also part of the idea is in meeting the challenge of the additional warming is to provide kind of like, these little parklets that would be available on the street. And this is something that's actually underway in El Sereno. And even, the big LA River, there are ways to meet the climate challenge by providing a more scenic, shaded area for that part of the San Fernando Valley. And so I referenced this before, the global climate models are usually 100 to 200 kilometer cells. And what the downscaling does is that it brings, and because of that, sometimes you have Santa Monica and Victorville in the same cell. And as we all know, there could be a 30 to 40 degree Fahrenheit difference between those two areas. So what the downscales do is that it really gives you data on per neighborhood. And that's what we've released, is going down to tell you different parts of the San Fernando Valley and what kind of extreme heat might be in store for these areas. And with that information, we're then able to really characterize on a neighborhood by neighborhood level what kind of impacts there will be in terms of warming and then the urban heat island effect as well. And so we know what extreme heat does, public health impacts, air quality impacts. On food supply, there are some good studies that show increased temperatures, decreased yields, energy demand, and also on the supply side too, on energy, the exchange of cooling down reactors, the heat exchange is much less favorable. And even transmission doesn't operate as well during higher temperatures. So, of course, water as well, water supply. And we think about property values, candidly. You know, there are areas that have a coastal influence now that are low-income areas. We could anticipate that those areas will be, you know, substantially impacted. And of course, the heat affects not just roads, but also rail as well. Urban heat island effect, you know, it adds, you know, I've heard estimates is, you know, anywhere from 3 to 23 degrees Fahrenheit of additional warming. And so with a cool roof, just the basics here, most roofs absorb that solar radiation, but by having the right kind of materials, and I should mention, it's very important to mention, there is an abundance of different materials that meet the standard of reflectance, that have that reflect sunlight. And right now, my coworker David Fink is at the Cool Roof Ratings Council conference in San Francisco. Why San Francisco for cool roofs? I don't know, but that's where they are. Because if you had to choose where you're going to live, maybe they chose San Francisco. So and so they literally have over like 1,000 different products on the market today of what can be used as a cool roofing material. Anyway, just to so there's some of the information. And in LA, we had an incentive also that accompanies the ordinance in the city of LA. And you can see the sort of level 1 and level 2 paybacks. And this is available for you on the thumb drive as well as in other places. So there are all the different products. Over 1,000 different metal products, over 100 thermostatic plastic products, 455 concrete clay tiles. So it's out there, the products are there. Here's the ordinance. Kind of don't want to get into this because we have these other hoops to jump into. And we also had another heat island provision that had to do with pathways, patios, and driveways, and I think this could something that can be replicated. Anyway, I spoke briefly in the other room about cool streets and how that's progressing along, and that's it for my comments. So, do I get to hand this over to Joe?
Yeah. Great, Joe. Thank you.
I'm Joe Lawyer from the California Energy Commission, and I'm a mechanical engineer there, even though my last name is Lawyer. My main responsibilities here in regards to cool roofs and the local ordinance in general has been to show and work with local jurisdictions on how they can have the ordinance that they want to enforce. The Energy Commission has an attitude that change happens locally. We may be one of the leaders in developing energy efficiency methodologies and techniques and measures, but we realize that the change that has to happen locally. if we invent these rules and regulations, but they are not enforced, if we show the way that energy efficiency measures can be used, but they are not used, it doesn't do anyone any good. One of the rules for having a local ordinance is to recognize that there are two different state commissions that are involved in approving it. The first one is the Energy Commission. When you have an energy efficiency standard, the Energy Commission has to approve it. The other agency is the Building Standards Commission. If the Building Standards Commission receives an energy standard that has not been approved by the Energy Commission, what they are supposed to do is kick it back to us. And then we will contact you and say, you cannot enforce this until you have got it approved by the Energy Commission. The commission approval. Only energy standards, local energy standards that are approved by the Energy Commission are legally enforceable. If you require that buildings under your jurisdiction be more energy efficient than what is required under the building standards, without our approval, it is not legally enforceable. I kind of say this in like 9 different ways throughout this entire presentation, but it's an important concept to understand. When we get a complaint from a local builder, we have to investigate. And that falls to me. And the first thing I do is I call up the chief building official and I say, I've reviewed your ordinance, because most of the time it's in the municipal code. And I tell them that, yes, it is essentially over the line and that they need to get it approved. They need to cease enforcement immediately, which is something the chief building official has the authority to do. And they need to work with me to get an application approved through the Energy Commission. More often than not, we don't have to change a thing. We just have to put the application together. And we usually work with utilities to do that. Last time, I can't say last year, but it's the last update, the 2008 standards. We had more than 50 local jurisdictions come through our doors through outreach and through education. We got 50 in the Energy Commission and approved. And in pretty short order. I got to be a regular at our business meetings. So we had not 1 or 2 here or there, we had 10 at a time. So it was very interesting. And there's a lot of variety as well. The applications, what is required? A copy of the ordinance, and you'll have all this. So the study, and this is the thing that usually throws everybody, the cost effectiveness study. That's usually where the utilities really come in and help out the most. This study actually, if you have a local ordinance, your ordinance has to be shown to be cost effective. Now, what you determine to be cost effective doesn't have to be the same as what the Energy Commission says is cost effective. We look at cost effectiveness in terms of 15 and 30-year paybacks. Only one of my local ordinances had a 100-year payback. Okay? So cost effectiveness, the definition of it, is really up to the local jurisdiction. What we're really looking for in this analysis is that the scope of the analysis matches the scope of the ordinance. So if you have an ordinance that has a residential requirement, and has a non-commercial or a commercial requirement, and your analysis only covers the residential, we're going to kick that back to you. A statement consumes no more energy than is permitted by Part 6 has to be part of your application package. Not necessarily your ordinance, but it's got to be part of your application at some point. The date the ordinance was presented to your either council or board, it has to be a publicly noticed meeting. That's important. The letter to the executive director, that's our executive director, that you will continue to enforce Part 6 as well as your ordinance. And evidence of SEEC compliance, and that is new for 2016. SEEC compliance is actually very, very simple. Most of the time, you're going to be finding that what you're doing is a project under CEQA and that it is exempt. So you're going to be taking the common sense exemption. And that is a one-page document that you need to fill out, 1 page.
You mentioned that was 2016, not 13?
That is 2013, I'm sorry. Yeah. Let's see, all documents are submitted electronically. You can submit into my email. A lot of jurisdictions want to submit them electronically plus hard copy. It's fine. If I only get them hard copy, I create an electronic version so that we handle it better and faster. Your ordinance, if you have a question as to whether your ordinance needs an approval, if you have a mandatory energy efficiency requirement that exceeds the state standard, if you're using a non-governmental certification program, like Greenpoint Rated or LEED or others, if you're adopting Cal Green Tier 1 or 2, and that's Appendix A4, A5, early adoption of the energy standards, no one did this. No one did this in the last 5 years. But it's on the books, it's possible to do. Adoption of stricter energy budgets. A lot of times what we saw was anywhere from 5%, saying explicitly be 5% better than the standard, to 35% better than the standard. A renewal or updating an existing ordinance. If you have an existing ordinance under the 2008 standards, once 2013 hits and is enforceable, your 2008 ordinance is no longer enforceable. You have to reapply because the cost effectiveness was based on a 2008 standard. So if you are saying in your 2008 standard that you want to be 15% better than the standard, than the state standard, the state standard has now moved, and you have to prove that you are further cost effective. That was 2008 overcome by 2013. Yeah, I like these little animations. These are fun. So non-governmental certification program. If the ordinance does not require formal certification when codifying a non-governmental certification program. It's really very tricky. When you use Greenpoint Rated and LEED in this fashion, when you try and codify those, you have to be careful about whether or not you're actually requiring certification, because certification under LEED essentially says that they have to be LEED compliant, either to whatever level that you're going to use, and that they have to then send that into USGBC, and USGBC has to certify it that they have met indeed that level. If you're requiring that, that certification doesn't come until, 3 to 6 months after occupation? So how are they getting their permit to occupy if they haven't completed the certification requirement? So you have to be very careful in the way that you write these up. So the ordinance must be very carefully stating whether certification is required or not. And the ordinance should make it clear that compliance with the ordinance is not certification with LEED, Greenpoint Rated, or other. Typical adoption, many standards, many ordinances target only residential, non-residential. They include triggers for new construction only, or based on square footage, or based on value. They include additions and alterations to existing buildings based on square footage, again, based on percent change or based on value. Seen all of these in a variety of different mixtures. And many of them specifically call out historic buildings.
What is it about historic buildings saying that they need to comply more or that they're exempt?
Well, it's actually both. Many of them actually spell out exactly what historic buildings have to do, and many of them actually spell out that historic buildings are exempt from their additional ordinance. Now, historic buildings are not exempt from the energy standard. The energy standard actually takes it into consideration. It's anything essentially behind the wall, anything that is not going to impact the look and feel of the building itself. So if you're going to replace the wiring in a historic building, you have to replace it to code. These are the local ordinances, the local jurisdictions that have local ordinances under the 2008 standards, and there are some 50 of them. This is actually a little short. I think I'm missing a couple. Most of them are, or many of them are using the Title 24 Part 6 forms to actually demonstrate that they are 15 to 30% above or beyond the code. Others are using LEED, 22 of them in fact. 6 require the certification, only 6. 26 of them are using Greenpoint rated. And you might say, hey, these numbers, they add up way more than 50. They actually are requiring Greenpoint rated and LEED, sometimes Greenpoint rated and LEED or LEED for homes and LEED for commercial. Remember, LEED is only for commercial, but there is a LEED for homes. And some of them are actually giving the option of using the forms, Greenpoint rated or LEED. And then quite a number of them started adopting Tier 1, and that became the favorite trend. So for 2013, we initially assumed we would get like 5 local jurisdictions because the 2013 standards were so tight. That isn't turning out quite to be true. We've gotten contacts from 15 local jurisdictions trying to put together cost effectiveness analysis. We're working with them, they're working with us. We're looking at how rigorous that cost effectiveness analysis really needs to be for them to get by. We would rather them do a rigorous analysis, but there is nothing in statute or regulation that says that we can demand that. It isn't something that we can demand, but we would prefer it. Primarily because it saves them down the long run. When they have to bring a rigorous analysis to the council or board, they have a lot more protection than when they bring a less rigorous one to the board, and they have some interaction from the local building community saying that these numbers aren't right, this won't work, everything else that they say. 5 of the local jurisdictions have never had a REACH code before, and they're looking into it now. This is all about Tier 1, Tier 2, the new Tier 1, Tier 2. The big new thing is prerequisites, energy design rating, and quality installations. I always get those, the QII, that's the easy way, QII. And then high efficacy lighting. Once you do those prerequisites, then you can pick either Tier 1, Tier 2, and it is a straight 15 and 30%. Very simple. This is additions and alterations. This is the first time a tier has included an addition and alteration specific requirement. So prerequisites, high efficacy lighting, and lighting controls. Lighting controls, dual switches on a hallway, motion sensor, occupancy sensor for a room. The addition of or alteration includes one or more of the mechanical systems. What are mechanical systems? Anybody know? HVAC. HVAC is a nice mechanical system. Also, domestic hot water. So one system, if you're modifying one system, 95%, 90% if it's more than one. And then for Tier 2, it just takes it a little bit higher. So if the addition or alteration changes the envelope without changing the mechanical systems, then no additional efficiency measures are required. And that's the reasonable line that we came up with for additions and alterations for Tier 1. So newly constructed additions and alterations, non-residential, exterior lighting, service water heating in restaurants, 95% of the outdoor lighting or 90% of the indoor lighting mechanical. And Tier 2 just moves the bar a little bit higher. And if the newly constructed building additions or alternatives does not include indoor lighting, mechanical systems, actually a newly constructed building would have both of these, but an addition or alteration might not. So the next big question everybody has is CEQA compliance. CEQA, you're the local jurisdiction, you're the CEQA lead. You have to do everything that CEQA requires. But in this particular instance, CEQA doesn't require that much. What we are a responsible agency under CEQA. We have to make sure that you did your responsibilities under CEQA, then we make our findings accordingly. The ordinance review. Now, when it comes down to it, when we review the ordinance, what are we looking for? We're looking for buildings that will consume no more energy than permitted by Part 6. Very simple. How do we do that? Make sure that your ordinance has clear requirements. Make sure that you have clear statements that Part 6 will be enforced. And exceptions and exemptions are explicitly limited to your ordinance. Part 6 has all kinds of exemptions in it. So one of the things you have to make sure that you avoid is accidentally extending one of your exemptions in the ordinance to Part 6, which you don't have the authority to do. So we're looking for elements that may also trigger federal preemption. You can't require a SEER 15 air conditioner. You can't require it. It's not making it mandatory is illegal. It's a federal preemption. And if you do that, we will review your ordinance and tell you, in fact, if you do this, you are going to be subject to a civil suit. Not from us, from the builders. So, we gladly review your draft ordinances. 1 to 3 day turnaround. I do this. The idea is I review your ordinance before your council or board takes a look at it, so that at that point it's easy to change. You know, it's not carved in stone yet. So we can actually get it to the point where it's something the Energy Commission can support, and it's the ordinance that you want to enforce. The best news is it's free. My salary is paid for, so you can bug me as much as you like. And here is some nice resources. The Energy Commission and Javier's contact information, and the building standards contact information. And that's me.
All right. So, so what I'm going to speak to is, I think what Joe presented to you is a very comprehensive overview of what it is to adopt a comprehensive REACH code. And what we're going to be talking about is, what if you just wanted to concentrate on a measure-specific REACH code, and in this case, a cool roof. So there are a lot of elements. We thought it was good for you to see the big picture. And you can see why out of 580 jurisdictions in the state of California, that only 50 went ahead and went through this process. And Joe and I and my other counterparts at the other utilities, as well as the actual staff members of these individual cities, went through a lot of brain damage to go through this. And then ultimately you have to go through a public hearing process. So you got to get your mayor and the council members, and if you're in a county, can you imagine getting your board supervisors? It was very difficult. So one of the interesting things about this new cycle, and seeing the work that Jonathan's doing, et cetera, is why don't we just kind of go after the cool roof? It's a measure that we think triggers the REACH code process, but there are a lot of things that you don't have to do. But the big things are the cost effectiveness study, for example. And so we'll go into that. And what I'll try to do is kind of share with you those elements that you still would be subject to, even though you're measure specific, and the kind of assistance that the utilities, in fact, my counterpart, Adrian, is in the back. He represents San Diego Gas and Electric. I have a counterpart at the Southern California Gas Company and a counterpart at PG&E. So we're all covered. So you don't have to, I'm acting as the statewide lead because we co-manage this as a statewide program. But I do have my, my co-patriot, so to speak, and we all share in the work. So just a little plug on energy codes and standards and what we are. Basically, we have been created, we work to work very closely with the California Energy Commission under the direction from the California Public Utility Commission. And I do believe we're the only utility program that has to work with both the California Energy Commission and the California Public Utility Commission. And the way to look at that is the CPUC, which is the Public Utility Commission. They set policy and they set the budget. California Energy Commission are the folks actually implementing the energy code. And so that kind of makes us unique in the space that we're working in. Just to give you an idea, if you look at energy savings goal, this is pretty true of the other utilities as well. If you think about the whole incentive program, the portfolio, as they say, 72% of the savings that come out of that are your typical incentive rebates that you may be very familiar with. But now 28% is coming from energy codes and the cool roof ordinance and the REACH codes that we've been talking about, things like that. So it's becoming an important aspect of energy efficiency efforts. Just to show you, does it work? Do energy codes work? Well, we think it does. What this is showing is after 1975, the red line shows the per capita use of energy for the nation, and you can see it just keeps going up. But if you look at California, along with the energy code as well as the programs, the incentive programs, et cetera, we've pretty much flatlined. And I think we can all agree that California has grown tremendously since 1975. So this work is important. It does work. And Western Europe, apparently, they know something we don't because they're doing pretty well. So that's what the blue line represents. Again, just another plug, is this important work? Yes, it is. If you're all familiar with the California Air Resource Board, they're the folks that are the ones that pretty much are in charge of implementing AB 32. And their roadmap, known as the scoping plan back in 2008, if you look at the bar under total emissions, which is to your left, business as usual, the bottom, which says transportation, right above that, that's circled in that, or kind of highlighted in the dashed red lines, that's natural gas and electricity. So everyone concentrates on reducing vehicle miles traveled, et cetera, but the next big contributor to greenhouse gas is energy use. So if you can reduce that, you're doing you're making great strides to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So there's that nexus, why this work is important and why the utilities are involved. And this is the CPUC's long-term energy efficiency strategic plan. Very big, bold strategies. They say by 2020, all new construction for residential will be zero net energy. Just by show of hands, who knows what zero net energy means? Okay, good. The working definitions, more or less, is whatever you consume, you actually put back into the grid, which pretty much requires some kind of generation on site, probably solar. By 2030, all new commercial will be zero net energy. So this is the equivalent when President Kennedy said we're going to the moon and nobody knew how, but we're going to the moon. This is pretty much the same thing. What's important is reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So we've got another mandate. And energy efficiency is first in the loading order. So before you start putting panels up and anything else, get that building to be as efficient as possible. So those are kind of like what's driving this and why the utilities are involved. Local governments have a very interesting role to play. They have a unique authority to pass REACH codes. And that's exactly what Joe was describing as, okay, this is the steps you have to go through. And for us, we're the utilities, we felt we can play a big role in helping jurisdictions prepare the cost effectiveness study, because that's highly technical and can get very expensive if you're not sure what you're doing. We can also help in the adoption of an ordinance in the sense that we can provide some technical assistance in drafting the ordinance, what would be a good trigger, et cetera. If you want to be measure specific or do you want to be performance based, et cetera, we can provide help in that arena as well. And then we can kind of assist during the review process overall. So that's just a kind of a high level on what we can do. What we're doing right now, specifically for cool roofs, is that we have hired a firm, an engineering firm, to look at the cost effectiveness of cool roofs. And what we're using are, we're using a level of performance that exceeds what's in Cal Green, Tier 1 and Tier 2, as kind of the goal. And if we figure if that's cost effective, if you were to adopt something that's less, stringent, then by default it's cost effective, right? So we're trying to be careful with how we're spending our money, obviously. So we picked that as the goal. And for the most part, we're doing it for all 16 climate zones, except for, I believe, climate zones 1 through 3, which are basically the Bay Area, only because a cool roof in those areas, because they're so cool already, given the fact, think of San Francisco, that a cool roof really wouldn't be, doesn't really do much for you. However, when you're in climate zone 10, which is basically where Chula Vista is, way down south, that's pretty hot. And that's where a cool roof becomes very, very cost effective for what it does. And so we're doing this, and I'm happy to report that I am done with the 4 or 5 climate zones that cover LA County and a lot of other areas of California. I've got maybe 4. I think I need 4 more climate zones to finish the entire state. And I hopefully will have that done by mid-July. So I'm pretty excited about that. And the good news is we're going to make this available for free, okay? And the reason we can do that is because I'm using ratepayer dollars. And so this should be made available to anyone who wants to do this. Okay, so that alone, that's for free. This is just to confuse you. Right now, what's in the yellow, right, which is to your left, those are what are known as the prescriptive measures that are under Title 24, Part 6, also known as the Energy Code. What's in green to your right are the prescriptive cool roof measures, or actually the voluntary measures in Cal Green. And it really breaks it down even further. And it's more for shock value. It can be very confusing. This is deceptive because each of those little tables, it took me a full day to find all of those, and and I gave you the sections, and they're not in one place. You have to hunt and peck for these. And I'm not kidding. It took me about a day to get this right, and then I had an engineer review everything just to make sure I got it right. So as an average person, this is very confusing. And what our study is doing is trying to explain what's going on out there. What the different regulations are, and what the REACH code cost effectiveness study is taking measures and specs that are even more restrictive than these. And so I don't want to dive deep into this because this would be a whole day kind of conversation. But the idea is trying to provide some more clarity in the marketplace, so to speak. The other major initiative beyond the help on the cost-effectiveness study and trying to explain the relationship between the Energy Code and Cal Green is, okay, let's say you went ahead and you adopted a cool roof ordinance. Great. How are you going to track the savings? And so what we're putting together is a tool that we'll make available for free, that a building department that adopts a cool roof can download, put it on their server, and with some very slight modifications to the permit process. Let's say I'm a homeowner, I'm going to replace my roof. So it triggers the cool roof ordinance. So when I pull my permit, there's about 2 pieces of information or 3 pieces of information that I would have to give that is over and beyond what normally I would have to give. The first is I would have to not only give them the square footage of the roof that I'm replacing, right? But I'm going to say the square footage of my house. That's an addition. The second thing is if I have an AC unit, what is the efficiency of my AC unit, my air conditioning unit? And a third, if I have a furnace in my house, which everybody pretty much does, what is the efficiency of that? And this wonderful little piece of software, and then of course you'll put in exactly the roof product that you're putting in. And this tool then will go ahead and calculate the savings over the estimated life cycle of that roof. So you can already project what this is going to do, and it will calculate your energy savings, kilowatt hours and therms, but it also will calculate greenhouse gas, CO2 emissions that are no longer going to be emitted. So if you're the planning department or whoever's in charge of tracking, reporting, hey, my climate action plan requires cool roofs, I adopted an ordinance, and I can show you that in the last year, 1,000 permits for residential re-roofs were issued, and here it is. You can aggregate it, you can break it down, you can slice and dice this data because you'll be the owner of this information. And it's electronic and it's yours. And so this would be a great tool because I think we're moving into, okay, we've got policy, but show me the savings. And here it is. It's measurable. You can see it. You can point to all the homes. You can now, with this data, and imagine what you can do for non-res, et cetera. So we're pretty excited about this tool. We hope to have this done by August. So that's the other piece of assistance that we're working on. Technical support also includes making ourselves available to facilitate public workshops with key stakeholders, because this requires a lot of education, a lot of awareness. People need to understand, why are we doing this? And why is it important? And how are we going to measure it? How do we define success? The other is, attending public hearings to answer technical questions, because not everybody's going to hit these workshops. And there's going to be somebody that said, I've never heard of this. This is crazy. This is too expensive. We can't afford to do this. We'd like to kind of be there and be able to not necessarily advocate for this, but we can provide technical questions so everyone can make a decision based on facts. And just another plug, we hope to have a lot of this information eventually on a website that we've developed very closely with the California Energy Commission. It's called energycodeace.com. And if you got any questions really related to the new code that's coming up, 2013, in about 2 weeks, please go to energycodeace.com. We've got a lot of different tools made available to help building departments as well as contractors, et cetera. And eventually, cool roof information is going to be on this as well. And I believe that's it for me. Thank you. And what we're going to do is kind of open this up for questions and discussion. And what I do ask, if you do have a question, raise your hand, because they are videotaping this, and they would like everything to be through the microphone so folks could hear your questions and can benefit from this discussion. So who wants to be the first? You want to be the first one? All right.
I'm just wondering, what are the costs to have this cost efficiency document generated, and what kind of assistance do you offer for local governments?
So the question is, in order to do a cost effectiveness study, what would the cost be to you? Free, nothing. Okay, so did I mention free? Yeah. All right, so it's free. Well, it's not free, right? It's ratepayer dollars, okay? And it comes from the California Public Utility Commission. So obviously we're audited. We have to be very judicious on how we spend that money, and we take that seriously. But that's why we're making it available for free, because it will have statewide benefits. And so that's why it's free.
Jonathan, you flipped through your slides pretty quick, but you said, I saw real briefly, reflectance value of 0.3 in the ordinance. Is that what was set for the ordinance?
I don't recall.
Okay, I was just curious how that got set. The other question is, with solar panels and solar thermal, is that an impact on this?
So getting into the actual physics of it, I would defer to others, and the engineering, I would defer to others. But on just theoretically, what I have heard anecdotally and others is that PVs actually perform in a superior fashion if they're combined with a cool roof material. and PVs perform better at lower temperatures. And when you have the warming on top of a typical rooftop, they don't perform as well. So we view that this could be complementary to both solar thermal and PV. But I would defer to an engineer on the specifics.
That is actually exactly what the Energy Commission has found, that these technologies are very compatible, either using solar PV or solar thermal with a cool roof.
With the ordinance, if you want to apply a new roof and then you have a pool with a huge solar thermal system on top of it, how does that get impacted?
If you have basically a pre-stage heater for the pool, that's essentially what that is it allows the pool water to be heated through the solar accumulation on the roof. A cool roof underneath that, obviously, if you're going to re-roof, you're going to have to pull that off. But once you've got the house re-roofed and the pool solar heating system reinstalled, it won't be affected by the cool roof, and neither will the cool roof be affected by the
Solar thermal.
pool heating system. Yeah.
I see.
Because there simply is less light hitting the roof, so there is yet less light to be absorbed.
Is insulation going to be an ordinance? I mean, it seems like that's a pretty cost-effective measure.
Actually, do you want to take that one, Joe?
Sure. It is something that the Energy Commission needs to approve if you're going to adopt it. And we've gone to a long extent to try and provide that cost-effectiveness analysis. Now, if you want to do something else, if you want to go to roof deck insulation as a mandatory requirement, that's also right now under Part 6, that's prescriptive. So if you want to make that mandatory, that again needs to be brought to us as an ordinance with a cost-effectiveness analysis. That certainly can be done. And the way the Energy Commission is looking at that right now for 2016, not 2013, but 2016, we're looking at that as being a part of the prescriptive requirements and possibly more insulation for the walls. I know that builders don't like to hear it, but we would love to see walls go to 6 inches in depth instead of 2x4 depth.
Yeah, and kind of along those lines, the city of Glendale didn't do the cool roof, but they made radiant barriers in the roof. In Glendale, it's mandatory. And so that was a cost-effectiveness study that we did for Glendale, but we did it by climate zone. So they're climate zone 9. Everything that we do is climate zone. Why? Climate zone 9 probably has 100 jurisdictions. So if I do it for climate zone 9, Glendale took advantage of it, but any other city that's in climate zone 9 could use that same study. So when I did LA County, I think that's 5 climate zones. That's probably more than 190 jurisdictions, I think, that can take advantage of just within those 5. So when you think there's 580 jurisdictions, I mean, I already hit 25%, right? So that's how we're trying to be smart with how we use our dollars. And we work very closely with Joe and his group of folks to make sure there is no one way of doing a cost-effective study. So if you want to go for it and do your own, great. He's going to check it out. But we went ahead because we know it's expensive.
Yeah.
It takes time.
Just
and we
come
kinda
talk
had
to
it
me
in.
first.
Yeah. And the thing is that there are no hard and fast rules yet. And so what we're trying to do is provide a service and provide some regional consistency. And if you do use one of our studies, hopefully the ideal is that Joe looks at it and he can turn it around really quick because he already knows the study. If it's something that you just did and it's written on the back of an envelope, he's going to look at it and try to figure out what's going on. And it might take a little longer.
Just following up on cost effectiveness studies, Susan Wright from San Mateo County, which is one of the 1 through 3 climate zones that you're not doing it for. But when you're doing the cost effectiveness studies, have you been doing it for current conditions or predicted conditions with climate change? I was just thinking our climate right now, we hardly have any air conditioning or in our county, but I think that's going to change. And so I was thinking this is really intriguing to say if we required cool roofs as a way to get people not to need the air conditioning on certain days.
Yeah, I would have to defer to my engineers that prepared the study And they just came to the conclusion that for climate zones 1 and 3, cool roofs don't do anything. And I'm assuming they're using current climate conditions, not predicted. So we've elected not to include those. I know Chula Vista in December of 2012 adopted a cool roof ordinance, and when we did the study for them, it was climate zone 7 and 10. And we found that climate 7, it's not cost effective. So their ordinance now is just for climate zone 10. So, you know, there's the economic reality. You could require and mandate it, but at the end of the day, it's like, what did you really do? What did you really accomplish? And so there's that kind of common sense part of it. And so from a technical standpoint, our engineers, and I guess it's a common consensus, that for those climate zones, it doesn't make sense. And when you start looking in the tables, especially under Cal Green, they exempt certain climate zones for that same reason. So the only thing I also want to plug that you said earlier, Joe, that I want to make it very clear that the cool roof ordinance or the cool roof regulations that are prescriptive right now under the 2013 code, which becomes effective in about 2 weeks.
Yep.
If you just decide, I'm not going to mess with those, but I'm going to make them mandatory, then that kicks in this whole process. Because prescriptive, now you're saying you have to do it. And once you say it's mandatory, it kicks it in. The good news is we have the study that's way more restrictive than what these are. So you're covered. And that's the whole intent. What we also tried to do was cover Cal Green, because you saw the other tables. So we picked measures that are even more restrictive than those. So our cost-effectiveness study should cover you if you decide to use Cal Green Tier 1 or Tier 2, or if you decide just to say, okay, I'll just take the energy code stuff and make it mandatory. It doesn't really matter. That one slide that I showed you, there's your menu right there. You can pick any of those. My cost-effectiveness study that will be done covers all of that and says it's cost-effective. That's the idea. So we're trying to eliminate a lot of busy work. And again, it's a concept that we've gone through with Joe just to make sure he's comfortable with that. So that's what we're working on. That's what Jonathan was talking about earlier. That's what we're doing right now with the City of LA. In fact, they've been very, very helpful. We're learning off of each other. And so at the end of the day, we're going to have to tip our hats off to LADWP, which is kind of pioneering a lot of this work. So can't take credit for all of that.
We would never say no to that. The Energy Commission's perspective of cost effectiveness analysis is, does the analysis match the ordinance in scope? So like I was saying before, if you wanted to use something like future environmental trends as the basis for being cost effective in your analysis, the only thing I would caution you about from the Energy Commission's point of view is that becomes a more difficult analysis to defend. But it's not impossible. And in many instances, cost-effectiveness analyses weren't even challenged. And in some instances, they were. They very much were. But in many instances, they weren't. The building community actually got behind the ordinance and said, not only do we not oppose this, we support it, especially when they're doing things like using LEED and Greenpoint rated. The building community seems to love those programs. With my warning about using certification programs like that, go with God, I say.
I should introduce myself. I'm sorry. I'm Courtney Collation, and I'm the lead implementer for a 3-utility local government partnership in the San Joaquin Valley, Climate Zone 13. So my question was, if we are going to try to encourage, because we have typically had a hard time getting our local jurisdictions because of the political environment to pass anything above and beyond, but this, because we have had some success with cool roofs on a one-off situation municipally, if we are going to get our partnership to sort of rally behind the concept, other than our energy champions, who should we have at the table to make sure that this goes through? If we have 13 jurisdictions that are a part of our partnership, who are the key players within each municipality, county and city-wise, that we need to have at the table for that conversation? Or that would think would be easiest and recommend to have involved in that?
But that's a long question. Jonathan, you want to take a first stab at that?
Yeah, there's actually an extreme heat guidance out of the California Department of Public Health. And in that guidance, it is very specifically recommends implementation of cool roofs. So you can use that to work with your county public health department as well. And polling shows that they make very good messengers, by the way. So, and they're influential with policymakers. I don't know if that gets to the heart of your question, though.
I think Joe and I represent kind of the technical aspect. But I think what Jonathan is alluding to is when you bring up the subject of cool roofs, it's not necessarily an energy efficiency issue. The issue is it's a public health issue. And then you have to frame it in that. And that's something that neither Joe or I can do. We're here to provide you with the hard data because there's a process. There's a regulatory process. We can get you through that. But you asked a key question, how do I get the political will? How do I get people to understand that this is important? And I don't think if you say kilowatt hours or this and that, that it's going to do anything. But you say this is a public health issue. And, you know, Jonathan spoke about what's going on and how eventually of all the menus, items that are out there, cool roofs are one of those things that you can do right now. And what we're trying to say is if you got that and can deliver that message, then Joe and I are, you know, we're telling you, well, there's a process behind this. It's bureaucratic, there's red tape, but we can get you through it, and it's for free. But the political will is the hard part, and that's something that you guys have to do. And so this issue, maybe it's your planning department. I mean, I would ask for any, by show of hands, who represents, who's a public or planning or building staff? You're the only one, right? Okay. Building or planning? Planning. Are you the one that's responsible for CEQA? Yes. Right. So let me ask you this. When any project that requires CEQA review, now you have to say, how are you going to mitigate your greenhouse, right, gas, your carbon footprint? Wow, if you had a cool roof ordinance, right, you're done. So start speaking to planners. Because every time a project comes, they're subject to CEQA. If you don't know what CEQA is, look it up, because that's going to be your most powerful tool. Nobody gets around CEQA. And every jurisdiction is responsible for enforcing it, and it's usually the planner. And they see it way up front. And that's when you can make changes, way up front. So you're key. You would be key. So you need to start speaking to or your local jurisdiction planner. So support your American Planning Association, California chapter. They meet on a quarterly basis. They have statewide conferences. This is a hot topic, right? So you're going to get us invited to the next APA conference on cool roofs. Any other questions? If you have any questions, we literally are on weekly calls every Monday. So either one of us, and we do meet regularly to talk about this kind of stuff. So thank you all again for coming.
I like the sound of it.